Okay, so I want to look real quick at religion. So I was reading a book the other day, last night, and it had mentioned in here that no state or federal government may set up a church. So this reminded me of how all religions or churches have to register before they can get tax exemption for federal taxes, right? They have to register as some kind of 501 whatever. So isn't that kind of the same thing? So each individual church has to register. Now, I know the intent was that the state and the federal government cannot choose a religion for the people, but it's sort of along the same lines in that the state or federal government is choosing what types of religions can get tax exemption. Like whatever religion it is, you have to, I believe I read at one point, you have to agree that there's one single higher power. So it's still along the lines of Christianity. Not everyone's Christian, and but it's still a type of religion. So isn't it sort of the same thing as setting up a church? So I wrote a few notes down and I wanted to go over my notes. So it says that's the same thing when they require a church or religious organizations to register in order to receive tax exemption. So that's because the money is legal tender, right? And legal means contract. So when you become legal age, you're becoming the age to do the legal things, which are contracts. You're becoming the age at which you can contract. So when you're 18, they say you can make contracts and establish legal relationships, correct? And so the legal age part, the age part of legal age is the age, which is 18, but the legal part is the contract or the relationship. Contracts are always and forever, and any way the contract is done, it's voluntary. Okay, so that's the tender part. The tender is it's done willingly, it's done peacefully. There's no duress involved. You do it because you want to. So legal is contract and tender is voluntary. So when we use the fiat money called legal tender, we're contracting and agreeing to pay a tax voluntarily. So to receive a benefit of tax reduction, we have to apply to register the church or religion and then receive a benefit since we're using money by contract voluntarily. And that is the price we pay when we use their contracts voluntarily, and they call it legal tender. So they remove the right of the people to freedom of religion by setting up a system where you're voluntarily registering your religion or church or whatever, could be a business, for tax exemptions, when if we were using lawful currency, the lawful money, which does not come with a contract, we're not forced into a contract when we use gold and silver, we would not have to register anything because there's no signature or no act that constitutes legal tender or a contract. we do or start or have or use whatever. So you're driving, you get a driver's license. Your license is a contract and it's tied into legal tender. So you could say that the driver's license is a type of legal tender because it's a contract done willingly. So money may be legal tender, or the fiat reserve notes may be legal tender, but that's not the only thing that's legal tender. There's a lot of things that are legal tender if you look at legal tender as a voluntary contract. Voluntary contracts can be performed explicitly or implicitly, or express or implied, which means an act such as passing the money from one hand to another, or showing your driver's license, or signing for the driver's license, or anything that you do willingly. And I would argue that almost everything done on this earth is a type of contract. As soon as you walk over into your neighbor's yard and you're on his property, you are unwritten law under his domain, and so you would have to abide by his rules. So when they establish a driver's license and tell you you need it to drive, and you get the driver's license, you're by contract with your signature or showing your documentation or driving your registered vehicle on the road, you are making a contract with them, right? So when you use gold and silver, it takes the power away from them. It takes the power away from the Federal Reserve Bank. It takes the power away from all these sort of public entities who try to get you to sign papers and stuff, because the contracts come under other people's authority. But when you use gold and silver, the contract is between you and the person you did it with. So like public services are not part of it. You're removed from their authority and you're taking back the authority. So you're saying, I made this contract with this person, because there's a difference between the person who initiates the contract and the person who accepts the contract. So if I hand you gold, I'm initiating a contract to receive something from you. Okay, so you're complying. I'm offering, because I'm handing it out, I'm offering. So I'm offering the contract, and you're complying because you're taking it. And then you give me the thing, and then I take it from you. So when we use the fiat money, the legal tender, we are voluntarily contracting to accept an offer from someone who calls itself government, or a public servant, or police, or commissioners, or politicians, or whatever, IRS agents, departments, their departments and all this stuff, whatever. We're accepting contracts with them, and all the contracts that they make, these pretend authorities, they're making using or based on a system of legal tender, which has to do with the money and the paper contracts. So when we use gold and silver, we're under a different system, okay? The United States loses most all of its power, including the power to tax people's wages, their income, the power to tax people on everything, basically. the roads, the fuel, exchange something for metal, and so on. So I think you kind of get the point. So legal tender is a type of contract, a voluntary contract, using or based on a system of paper or man's law. When you contract differently, or contract in nature, contract naturally, it's a different type of system altogether, because it takes away authority from the people who make those paper contracts, that legal tender. So there's a difference between legal tender and lawful money. And I believe in the Constitution it says that gold and silver is lawful money, because gold and silver comes without some make-believe authority based on a system of paper contracts. So exchanging gold and silver is a type of unwritten law or common law contract, whereas the legal system is different. So if you can understand the two different systems, man's law and natural law, I think you'll get the points made to you a lot easier about the currency, the paper money, and the gold and silver. So gold and silver being natural, we make natural contracts, but legal tender being man-made, we make man-made contracts. So there's a type of authority that is natural, or considered by most people to be natural, and there's a type of authority, unnatural, outside of natural law, and those are different types of contracts where you're giving somebody authority just because you want to, voluntarily, but they have no natural authority. They get there by some other means, their positions by some other means. And I believe there's a lot of people in government who are holding those positions that are doing things outside of the Constitution and what the people originally agreed to what the federal government or the state government would do. And it's outside of natural law, or outside of what the majority of people voted on. And so when we go back to gold and silver, they can hold those positions because they can hold those positions in their more natural capacity, because they're unable to make those paper contracts, that legal tender. So using gold and silver does away with a lot of these fake things that we say, well, we have to do it because they say it's the law and they wrote it down on a piece of paper, but they're using an authority to do these things that doesn't actually exist until you agree to it. Once you agree to it, it exists for you. So for example, I don't pay your taxes, you pay your taxes. I don't drive with your license, you have a license, and when you have a license, those laws apply to you. When you sign your child's legal name, you created the legal name on the birth certificate. I didn't. I have no authority over it. The parent has authority until the child begins to use the legal name on their own. So on and so forth. When you sign your Social Security number card on your Social Security card, you sign it. That's your number for your use, not mine. So I can't assume to have the law applied to me when I made no signature for it, or I performed no act for it. And this goes into why they rename everything. So instead of traveling, they call it driving. Instead of private property, they call it a motor vehicle. And then they put all these things in there like what a motor vehicle is. And sure, you can say my private property meets all the qualifications of being a motor vehicle, but the issue is who has authority over it. The government doesn't call it private property, because if they called it private property, they would have to acknowledge they have no authority over it. Just like gold and silver, if you use gold and silver, they have to acknowledge they have no authority over it. If you're using the legal tender that they created, you're acknowledging they have authority over it. If you go and get a driver's license, you're acknowledging they have authority over you when you're driving. When you register your private property and you agree to call it a motor vehicle and what you do in it is drive, you're acknowledging they have authority over it for you. And they've expanded it so that now if you're driving someone else's property, they give you the ticket for what the owner did or didn't do with their private property, with their motor vehicle, calling it a motor vehicle. So that's why they don't want us using gold and silver. I think whether or not they have any at Fort Knox or anywhere else stored somewhere, that's sort of neither here nor there for this issue as far as contracts go. So whether or not they have any at Fort Knox, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying that it's not important for this video. So what's important for this video is for you to understand that when you register things or when you agree to things, you're agreeing to things that they had no authority to do to you until after you agreed to it. So how do they get you to agree to it? By saying all these things like you have to, and you have to register it, you're going to get a ticket and you're going to go to jail and you're going to, get your everything confiscated and all that stuff. And I'm not saying they don't do that, but I'm saying as a whole, they don't have the authority to do it. So even though they don't have the authority to establish a religion or establish a church for the people, they sort of, in a way, still control it, which is really the point, control. So the point of not establishing a church or a religion was not to allow control over that thing. So once they alter the words and they say, well, if you register it, you can get tax exemption. Well, you wouldn't need any tax exemption and you wouldn't need to register it if you were using gold and silver, because then they would have to acknowledge that it's not a paper contract and they have no authority over it. Because then these are private contracts between people. So when a church accepts money from its congregation, it would never have to pay taxes on that money anyway. You can go out and buy gold and silver and they don't tax it. You can go out and buy commodities and they don't tax it, because these commodities are not taxable. They don't belong to the government. The government can't claim authority over it. Just like they can't claim authority over you and your private life until you start using the paper money, the public contract, the fiat currency, the legal tender, and start letting them take control of you and your private life by using this legal tender, and they're signing their forms and making applications and creating legal names and all these other things, and letting them rename your private property to call it other things, and renaming your money and reestablishing a new money and calling it a legal tender, when really it's all just a contract. So you're contracting with some authority, some person or some group or some government that doesn't really have authority. And when you're contracting with them, you're giving them authority. So you're giving them authority that they wouldn't have had unless you did the thing or signed the thing, which signing is doing, saying is doing, complying is doing. Those are all contracts. Those are all legal tender because you're doing it voluntarily and you're doing it as a contract. Now, again, contracts are not all paper. They're not all paper contracts. The fiat currency is a paper contract. When you use it, you are doing the thing. When you pass it from one hand to another, you accept it, you give it, you use it, you are doing the thing. So remember, we talked about Austin's book, How to Do Things with Words, but that includes actions. So words by saying, okay, I do, I bet, I will, I christen, I baptize, I accept, here, take my money, or doing a thing like handing it over. You don't even have to say a thing. It's a system that they've set up to where they say you have to, and then you do it, and once you do it, you're contracted in. If you didn't do it, they couldn't force you to do the thing that you agreed to do by doing the thing or signing the thing, which is doing the thing. So you see how you're caught in this this faulty logic, this cycle, this redundant cyclical, or I've read one writer, as far as the habeas corpus, call it elliptical. So when they act outside the Constitution, they turn the power of the Constitution off and they have no power. And then when they act inside the Constitution, in their office, in their constitutionally created office, they turn the power back on. So when they act outside the Constitution, it turns the power off. So what do they have to do? They have to get you to agree. They have to get you to file a form, apply for a permit, apply for a legal name for your child, apply for a social security number, apply for a driver's license, apply to register your private property, all these things that get you to give them the authority that they didn't have in the first place by doing something, signing something, saying something, agreeing to something, acting something, using something, the legal tender. Okay, so neither a state nor a federal government may set up a church. And that applies to a lot of things that they're not supposed to do. Because they're not supposed to do a lot of things. They're not supposed to do anything outside the Constitution. But they do it anyway, and they get you to sign it or agree to it to give them back the authority that they didn't have to do it in the first place. Okay, so with that, please like, share, subscribe. This is Jen, the Liberty Lion, and we're talking about freedom here. So share the video, give me a thumbs up, comment if you like. I try to answer questions if you have any. Acknowledge every comment with a thumbs up or heart or whatever it is. And I have a couple more videos I plan on doing. Hopefully today. I have stuff going on, but if not, tomorrow. And have a great day, and I'll see you soon.